Today, I had the honor of connecting with Louise Digby. Louise Digby is a registered nutritional therapist, women's weight loss expert, and founder of the Nourish Method to lasting fat loss. Her clients come to her after struggling to lose weight despite eating well and working hard to burn the fat. Louise transforms her clients' health and well being by identifying and addressing each individual's unique needs and imbalances so that they can lose weight, optimize their health, and rediscover their sparkle without following restrictive eating patterns or needing superhuman willpower. Today on the episode, Louise and I talk about some misconceptions about just follow a calorie deficit diet and the concept of eat less and move more and how that can be misleading. We also talk about common hormonal imbalances that happen in women and why that impedes their ability to lose weight. We also talk about the role of willpower in losing weight, toxic load, and so much more. I hope you will enjoy this episode with Louise Digby. Hey, friend, before we get into today's podcast episode, I want to let you know about an amazing opportunity. I am launching Mastering Menopause. It's a 4-week program where I'm going to teach you everything you need to know as a woman when you're transitioning from perimenopause into menopause, because this is a pivotal time in a woman's life. And I want you to have the knowledge on how to optimize your health, not only during this time, but to set yourself up for vibrancy and great health well into your 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. This is an important time because of our hormone imbalances that occur. And I know this leads to problematic symptoms that people tell me about. They don't like the belly fat. They don't like feeling that they're losing their cognition. They don't like feeling like they can't sleep through the night. So these are all areas we are going to cover in this program and so much more. It's all about empowering you so you have the necessary information to take the next steps to mastering this important transition time in a woman's life. To sign up, go to epicu.com, click on the Work With Me tab, and you can sign up for the Mastering Menopause program there. I will tell you spots are limited because we're going to get to all the questions and answers during this program. So I want to keep this program small in its initial rollout. So if you're interested, please go to my website to sign up, and I can't wait to see you there. Louise Digby, I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I want to get started with a question I really like to ask a lot of people in this space where we're helping and empowering women to lose weight is, what are some common misconceptions that you find that you have to work with dispelling those myths that we picked up along the way in terms of understanding what really works for true fat loss?
Well, I think probably the biggest one is that all you need to do is be in a calorie deficit and you'll lose weight. And it's just such a misconception because there's so many things that need to be in place for your body to be able to burn fat efficiently. And getting into a calorie deficit is like one small piece of the puzzle. We've got to make sure that we've got enough nutrients and that our hormones are balanced and we've got enough muscle mass and our gut's working properly and that, our liver is detoxing properly and all these things, they all work together to help you to manage your weight. So that is probably one of the biggest ones and one of my biggest bugbears, particularly right now when you see on social media, you hear a lot more about hormones and, the more holistic approach to weight loss, but then there's a lot of pushback from certain professionals who are very much drumming in that it's just calories, it's just calories. So yeah, that is probably the biggest one that I come across all the time.
Yeah, it's kind of going back to what I've talked about on this podcast before, is that calories in, calories out formula that we were taught that doesn't necessarily align with true weight loss that's sustainable, and particularly fat loss. And sometimes our bodies, I see some women that take that to an extreme, right? And so sometimes it's about adding the right types of nutrients, which turn into calories back in. I mean, being in this deficit so much that their body doesn't feel safe.
Yeah.
Or balanced, like you say, hormonally, to be able to drop the weight that they were looking to drop. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I see so many women who are under eating, and there's lots of diets out there that, the kind of their foundation is very low calorie. And oftentimes that's like meal replacements or shakes. And it's just such a small amount of calories. And with that, you're going to be losing muscle, you're going to be undernourished, lots of nutrients are going to be lacking. And a lot of them are fortified, these products, but it's not the same as getting those nutrients from real food. So, yeah, all of those things that are missing, including the calories, have a really big impact on your body because, your brain needs fuel, your thyroid needs fuel. And if it's not getting those, then everything's just going to slow down to compensate for that lack of fuel coming in.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me what you think about this is something that we've learned along the way that's been advocated here a lot in the United States is this concept of move more, eat less. So I think we touched on the eat less part, but I think a lot of women get stuck in that mindset because we've been told that, just move more and eat less, and that will help
Mm.
us lose weight.
It's definitely important to be active and move regularly and in very intentional ways. But I think often the thing that a lot of people opt for is doing loads of cardio because it gets you the highest calorie burn when you're monitoring it on your Fitbit. And that can actually be counterintuitive because loads of cardio or very high intensity workouts can really drive up your cortisol levels, so drive up your stress response. And that's not something we want, certainly not more than just temporarily, because when our cortisol levels are high, that is very disruptive to our sex hormones. It's very inflammatory, and it's something that can be a real blocker to weight loss, particularly if you're someone who is already under stress. And that stress might not be obvious stress, but it could be stress of undereating. It could be stress of lack of sleep. It could be if you're in any sort of physical pain, then that is a form of stress. It could be, stress that we might recognize more easily, like financial pressures, or maybe it's just being busy all the time and never getting a chance to rest. Even if you're enjoying that busyness, it's still a state of stress for our bodies. And so when you add on top of that really intense exercise, it can exacerbate that cortisol response.
Yeah, and I love how you explain that so well because I think what I don't like about the move more, eat less is that it's not as simple as that. And not only that, that's focusing on kind of a little bit of the action. And like you said, it's missing some of the other actions that are important, some of the other to dos. And it's also not really teaching or educating women about their bodies and how they work. And I like how we're now talking about that's the hormones, right? And a lot of people, when they hear the word hormones, they just think sex hormones, or we're just talking about, sexual things. But really, our bodies are designed to be in this hormone balance. And when our bodies are in a hormone balance, right, that's when our bodies perform optimally. They do the functions that they're supposed to be doing, detoxifying, getting the right nutrients, maintaining a stable, ideal body weight. And I think not pulling in and really educating women around all that interaction around hormones. And the one you just pointed out was cortisol, right? And we know high cortisol, I've talked about it on the podcast before, where it just leads to stress bod, right? Because when we're under
Mm.
stress, a lot of us may turn to food, right? Because we're feeling stressed and we don't want to feel that. And that's a way to comfort. There are also the opposite where people, when they get really stressed, they don't eat and they tend to undereat, right? And
Mhm.
underfuel their bodies. And so their bodies will slow down that metabolic state and it'll be harder for them to lose weight. So whether they're overeating or undereating, right, they're still not hormonally balanced because of that stress, because of that high cortisol that is just floating around all the time. And I don't think many of us are aware of all the hormonal dysfunctions that come and how they need to be in alignment for proper weight loss. So you talked about cortisol and stress and how that can lead to like a stress bod where we're just kind of maintaining that weight in our middle area, in the belly fat area. What other hormone imbalances do you feel are important for women to understand in order for their body to be able to lose fat and weight?
Like you said, there's so many sets of hormones. So I think it's really good to clarify that, because so often when we say hormones, we do just think about the sex hormones. But another really important group of hormones is your thyroid hormones, particularly for women. And, it's such a common imbalance. Just see it all the time over here in the UK. And I'm sure it's probably the same where you are. The typical tests that your doctors run are very basic and miss a lot of thyroid problems. So it's even more prevalent than we realize. But yeah, your thyroid hormones are really important. They essentially control the speed of your metabolism. So if your thyroid is under functioning, even just a little bit, that is going to be slowing down every kind of chemical reaction that happens in every cell in your body. So that means slower fat burning. It means slower recovery from exercise. It means slower energy production, slower gut function, and poorer absorption of nutrients. So everything is slower. So that is something that is very much impacted by doing too much exercise, or too much intense exercise, I should say, and not eating enough. Because if your thyroid is underfueled, it's just going to slow down even more. If your hypothalamus and your brain is underfueled, that's going to slow down the production of hormones, because it's the hormone control center. And then that's going to have a knock-on effect on the thyroid as well. So thyroid hormones are really important. And then we've got your blood sugar hormones as well. So a lot of people are familiar with insulin, and I kind of refer to this as essentially our fat storage hormone, because when we've got too much insulin floating around, then we're essentially in fat storage mode. And that tends to correlate with our blood sugars. So if our blood sugars are too high too much of the time, we're going to be producing too much insulin. It's going to be very difficult for us to get burning fats. And then you've got insulin's counterpart, which is glucagon. And that's the one that we produce more of when our blood sugars are too low. So these two hormones work together to regulate your blood sugars. But we do have to give our bodies a helping hand by trying to manage what we're eating and our stress and exercise, so that our blood sugars aren't really, really high or dropping really, really low. That's going to help us to lose weight steadily.
Yeah. So I like how you're presenting this multi-system effect, right? It's not just one set of hormones, right? We have to look at like a series or a panel of hormones. And that's why it's really important to get the proper lab work tested. And I love how you mentioned it's hard to truly diagnose the thyroid unless you get the full thyroid panel. And a lot of GPs and, they just get the two measurements really around thyroid to assess thyroid function. And that's very limiting, because it is going to miss how your active thyroids are functioning, right? And oftentimes those laboratories are not generally done or run by some traditional practitioners. So really understanding like, okay, I really want to know how optimally my thyroid is functioning. And I can only assess that if I get the right laboratory data from that. And even when I was practicing as a pharmacist, Synthroid, which is one of the medications you take when your thyroid is suboptimal, was one of the top 10 prescribed medications in the United States, because it's so prevalent that people have an underactive thyroid, particularly as they go through the change into menopause. A lot of times our bodies will slow down in many ways, and that's when these hormonal imbalances start to present themselves. And so it's truly something that I think women should be empowered to know about so that they can get properly tested, so that they're not experiencing these side effects that are, making them feel sluggish or tired or gaining weight, or their hair is thinning, or they're feeling more constipated, like all those symptoms that happen when we have a low functioning thyroid. And then, as you mentioned, other factors, right? The insulin and the glucagon, and how are we utilizing that? And
Mm.
just studies in the last 5 years have shown here in the United States that 88% of us at least are metabolically unhealthy, meaning we're storing fat. We are not burning fat. And so this is leading to an increase in diabetes, an increase in prediabetes. And I'm sure you see it all the time where people may be in these categories of prediabetes and they're really not being explained or told
Mm.
what to do to prevent it from getting to be full-blown diabetes and how to reverse it, because these conditions can be reversible.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had many a client who's come to me and their doctors tested their sugars, they tested their HbA1c, and the patient has been pre-diabetic. In some cases, they've been diabetic, and the doctor hasn't even mentioned anything to them. And it's just crazy to me. But yeah, these conditions are reversible. And particularly pre-diabetes is very reversible and very achievable to do that in not a particularly long time frame. You can do it in a matter of weeks or months if you're particularly focused. And obviously, if you've had diabetes for a while and it's been uncontrolled for a while, then it's going to take longer. But it's very achievable to do it in most cases. People aren't told that. And it's similar for thyroid as well. I mean, there's a bigger variety of kind of the ways that the thyroid can go wrong. Most often people, when they are correctly diagnosed with underactive thyroid, they're obviously given medication and that's that. But what they're not told is that actually we can heal the thyroid and get it functioning more optimally. Medication, yes, it's helpful, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a forever thing if we address the underlying causes.
Yeah, beautifully stated. Beautifully stated. I know I'm on a particularly looking at keeping my thyroid running actively and smoothly, and working with a functional medicine doctor, as well as looking at my labs to make sure I'm optimizing it so I can prevent having to go on long-term medication and do all I can.
Mm.
Because there's so much we can do with lifestyle and our habits.
Yeah.
What's another area that you look for women when you're helping them lose body fat and really stabilize their hormones? What's another important key area you work with them on?
So gut health is a really big one. We test our clients' guts, pretty much all of them, to look at the microbiome, and pretty much all of them have suboptimal balance of bacteria in their gut. Most of them got something going on. Not all of them have obvious digestive symptoms. So, often it can be a bit of a surprise for them that that's an area that they need to focus on. But the gut is really, really important when it comes to overall well-being, but particularly your hormones and your weight management. There are species of bacteria in the gut that can very much correlate with whether your body is storing fat or burning fat. And, there are species of bacteria that can increase the amount of glucose you absorb from your food, or the amount of calories you absorb from your food. So one meal for one person could have a very different impact than that same meal for another person, in terms of how it impacts their blood sugars or the levels of inflammation in their body. So the gut microbiome, that's just kind of like one small way in which it can impact your body, but there's so many ways that it can have an impact. It can produce toxins. The bacteria can produce toxins that your body then has to process and eliminate. The bacteria can overstimulate your immune system and drive autoimmune issues, which again can be linked to the thyroid or various other things. So, getting the gut into a healthy balance in terms of making sure that you're absorbing your nutrients properly, you're breaking down your food properly, the bacteria is in a healthy balance, the yeasts are, not overgrown, the gut lining is happy and healthy. all very, very important for, as I say, health and also weight management.
Yes. And I found in just my experience in working with my own gut microbiome, studying it and learning more about it, I had yeast overgrowth, and that really causes more sugar cravings. And
Mm.
you try to do these things such as willpower, which I want to get to here in a minute, but, thinking I'm failing at it. And why do I keep having these sugar cravings when if I just get to the root cause of what's causing them and getting at this yeast overgrowth, then it became, oh, so much easier. And I didn't even feel like I had to, quote, rely on willpower. And so I wanted to transition to that and really talk about. I think a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm failing at this. I don't have enough willpower. These are common sentences I hear from women. Like, if I just had more willpower, if I just can curb these cravings, then I'd be more successful. What are your thoughts around willpower? And is that a strategy that women should be looking at in terms of, helping them with weight loss?
Willpower is such a multifaceted thing because, like you said, what's going on in your gut can impact your cravings. The gut brain connection is so important, and what's going on in your gut can influence your mood. We create some of our brain chemicals in the gut, and so if there's imbalances in the gut, that's going to have a knock-on effect on the brain and your mood. And obviously, if you're feeling low, then that is going to impact your levels of motivation and how strong your willpower is. So the gut is a big influence. And then you've also got your blood sugars as well. We were talking about highs and lows in the blood sugars before. And when your blood sugars dip down low, what your body needs to get out of that crash is sugar or carbohydrates. That's the quickest way to get out of it. So your body is really clever, and it will give you cravings to eat sugar or carbohydrates to help you normalize your blood sugars quickly. And so many people that I work with do not have stable blood sugars initially and are really at the mercy of their blood sugars highs and lows. And when you're having these regular dips, you just have very little control over your cravings. And, willpower is very rarely strong enough to overpower that drive for sugar or carbs when you're having a blood sugar dip. So willpower, I think, is something that actually, if you can get a good balance in your gut with your blood sugars, then willpower doesn't even really need to be a factor because you're not going to be battling cravings all the time. And then I haven't even mentioned sex hormones. And, for women who are having a regular menstrual cycle, you go through different phases throughout the month. And in some of those phases, particularly in the week before your period, you are more likely to crave carbohydrate rich foods. And, you might need a little bit more carb during that time. So you've also got to think about, where are you in your cycle? Because that's going to impact how motivated and driven you're feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely experienced that with my cycle for sure. And I love how you were saying, so much of the neurotransmitters are made in the gut. Just looking at serotonin alone, this neurotransmitter is made, 90% of it is made in our gut. So if we are eating foods that aren't supporting the gut lining to make the serotonin, then when it floats up to the brain, if we don't have it made, right, we are going to feel more depressed, more low, more sad. And then that creates that cycle of, okay, I don't want to feel sad or low. I want to feel calm or happy. And let me just, not only from a low blood sugar standpoint, but just from a lack of serotonin, right, could be driving that desire for wanting to feel better and then consuming those refined carbohydrates, which do give us some pleasure, do light up the brain's reward center, because that's how these ultra processed foods were designed. And coming back to carbohydrates, right? I know you're probably thinking and focusing on those refined carbohydrates because we don't want to demonize all carbohydrates, because vegetables are a form of carbohydrates and those are needed for the body. But right, just focusing on those refined, ultra processed ones that are the quick, easy to go, grab to go, convenient food in a package, which makes them just so easily accessible. to us, right?
Yes,
Get that quick hit.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's those ones that we tend to crave, and it's those ones that tend to be devoid of nutritional value as well. So aside from them picking up our blood sugars quickly when we're having a crash, they don't really contribute a lot to our, overall nutritional health.
Exactly. And I just love Brussels sprouts, but it's very hard for me to overeat Brussels sprouts. I won't eat bags and bags of them, but certainly I can eat, way more cookies or Doritos or something of that is processed and devoid of nutrients. And I think it's because my body's like, hey, I'm not getting enough nutrients. Keep eating, keep eating, keep
Yes.
eating. It's not just the hedonic factor that comes with these ultra processed foods, but it's also like my body is really, truly telling me I'm not satiated yet. You didn't give me the right macros to help
Mm.
me feel satiated where all my hormones are like leptin and ghrelin. We didn't even get into those, but those are hormones that start to say we're full and turn off hunger and turn on satiety. So yeah, really looking at how food causes certain hormones to be secreted or not secreted, which would ultimately tell us, okay, we've had enough and we've had the proper amount of nutrients. So now we can be done with eating and we're no longer going to send up hunger signals.
Mm, yeah, and I think that so often when people are overeating, it is when they're having too much ultra processed food in their diet. Because, like you say, that food isn't providing your body with what you need. Usually, not only is it lacking in nutrients, but it's also lacking in protein. And, if we don't have enough protein in our food, our body's going to get it one way or another. And it's going to give you cravings to keep eating and eating until you reach your protein requirement. And protein is so satiating that, it doesn't mean that we can't have these processed foods in our diet, but being mindful to get our protein in and get it from quality sources is really going to help you to manage the amount of those processed foods that you're having.
Yeah, it's like crowding them out, right? You fill up your plate with the good stuff that your body actually needs. So you crowd out the
Mhm.
stuff and then hold off on having that till the end or, making sure you get your body's macros and requirements in that it truly needs to have it functioning very well, optimally, as I
Mm.
like to say.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts around detoxing? This is an area that just reading a lot of the information about it, having my own journey of studying my microbiome, having it tested and seeing that, yeah, I can use a detox because I'm starting to accumulate in certain areas in my gut. And so going on a detox, or I don't like to use the word cleanse because that's like popularized and that's not really super medical. And for some people,
Mm.
that's just a bunch of juices and there's high sugar content and it's really not doing the body a service like we think it is. So I really want to say detoxification. Tell me your thoughts around detoxification and when you recommend your clients do one.
It's definitely very important to support your body's detoxification because, even though we hear out there that your body's always detoxing, you don't need to do a detox. I hear doctors say this on social media. But the thing is, yes, our livers are great at detoxing. However, in this modern world, we are exposed to so many chemicals or toxins that come from things like pollution and pesticides and our skincare products, things like parabens and phthalates that are in our skincare products, hormones and antibiotics that are in our food, fragrances that, we spray around the house or in candles, so many things that we're exposed to that we wouldn't have been exposed to, let's just say back when we were cavemen.
Right.
Um,
Plastic from our water bottles. Yeah. All
yes.
those microplastics in our Starbucks cups and lids. Yes. Yes. All of that is toxic.
Yeah. And when you look at it, it's pretty much constant. We are constantly exposed to these things. And so your liver has this huge burden to deal with. We have to get rid of them because whilst they're circulating around your body, they're damaging. So it's very important for our bodies to be able to get rid of these toxins. And if we're lacking in nutrients or our gut isn't working properly, then your liver could be working sluggishly. It might not be able to cope with that toxic load. So even though it is constantly detoxing, often it needs a little bit of support. And that might be in the form of a detox. I don't generally tend to recommend anything extreme, but I think a gentle detox can be very helpful. Just doing day-to-day things that help to, one, reduce your exposure to toxins. We can't eliminate our exposure completely, but we can start taking steps that help to reduce our exposure to some of these toxins. But also we can do little things that can really support detoxification. And one of the most simple things is making sure that we're hydrated. And it's one of the most boring recommendations in the world, but it is one of the most important and the one that I consistently see people not managing to achieve very well. So yeah, being hydrated is super important for supporting your liver function. And then there's ingredients that are easy to incorporate, like herbs and spices are, great for supporting the liver, particularly things like turmeric and teas that contain things like green tea, milk thistle, really nice for supporting the liver very, very gently and helping your body to cope with this toxic load.
Yes. And speaking of toxic load, because this podcast used to be called Drink Less Lifestyle, we can't forget the obvious, the alcohol. And how much we detoxify our liver on weekends or party. And yeah, so we want to just be gentle with our livers because they do so much work for the body. And we can't live without them. So really supporting our liver and taking time to do that periodically, right? It's not just, once a year kind of thing. I really think about supporting my liver more frequently than that. Daily rituals would be great, of course. But then I think sometimes getting tested and see if it needs more intense detoxification. I think that's important to really test your body and see where it's at. I think, that's really important to say, oh, okay, let me assess my liver. And there's many tests that we can do to see detoxification and how to support the liver that way. Louise, tell me how you got into doing what you were doing.
So I started out working with everyone and anyone in terms of their health goals, IBS, depression, eczema, you name it. And what I found was that pretty much everyone I worked with also wanted to lose weight. And then I had some people that just came to me just for weight loss. And the women who were over 35, 40 were the ones who struggled the most with their weight. And interestingly, it was the people that were focusing most on weight loss who were getting the worst results. The people who were working on addressing the imbalances in their body to address IBS, eczema, whatever their problem was, were actually seeing better weight loss results. So that really triggered my fascination with uncovering the underlying causes of stubborn weight. Because at the time, when I trained, there wasn't a lot of emphasis on how to support someone through a weight loss journey and how to go deeper than just coming up with creative ways for them to eat less and manage their portion control and get more exercise in. It was a relatively simplistic approach to weight loss, but we did all this work on how to balance hormones and address things like IBS. So I really started honing in on how to support people to lose weight without having to go on a diet, and particularly for women over 35, 40, because that is such a challenging time to lose weight because of how the body changes, metabolism wise, hormone wise, and also just how it's just usually such a hectic time of life. Young children, often older parents, still working full time and just being constantly busy. It's kind of a recipe for weight gain, unfortunately. But when we start focusing on what's going on inside the body rather than just trying to eat less and exercise more, the results are so much better and much more sustainable as well.
I love that. I love that. Well, Louise, it's been so great having you on the podcast. Can you please share with my audience and my listeners how they can work with you or how they can find you?
Sure. So you can reach me on socials by searching at Louise Digby Nutrition. My website is louisedigbynutrition.com. And I've got various resources that you can download from there and a masterclass on metabolism that you can also join me for as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing your expertise on my podcast. It was great having you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.